The tractors came over the roads and into the fields, great crawlers moving like insects, having the incredible strength of insects. They crawled over the ground, laying the track and rolling on it and picking it up. Diesel tractors puttering while they stood idle. They thundered when they moved, and then settled down to a droning roar. Snub-nosed monsters raising the dust and sticking their snouts into it, straight down the country, across the country, through the fences, through the dooryards, in and out of gullies, in straight lines. They did not run on the ground, but on their own roadbeds. They ignored hills and gulches, watercourses, fences, houses. The man sitting in the iron seat did not look like a man. Gloved, goggled, rubber dusk mask over nose and mouth, he was a part of the monster, a robot in the seat. The thunder of the cylinders sounded through the country, became one with the air and the earth, so that the earth and air muttered in sympathetic vibration. The driver could not control it. Straight across the country it went, cutting through a dozen farms and straight back. A twitch at the controls could swerve the cat, but the driver's hands could not twitch, because the monster that built the tractor, the monster that sent the tractor out, had somehow gotten to the driver's hands, into his brain and muscle, had goggled him and muzzled him, goggled his mind, muzzled his speech, goggled his perception, muzzled his protest. He could not see the land as it was. He could not smell the land as it smelled. His feet did not stamp the clods or feel the warmth and power of the earth. He sat in an iron seat and stepped on iron pedals. He could not cheer or beat or curse or encourage the extension of his power, and because of this he could not cheer or whip or curse or encourage himself. He did not know or own or trust or beseech the land. If a seed dropped, did not germinate, it was nothing. The young thrusting plant withered in drought or drowned in a flood of rain. It was no more to the driver than to the tractor. He loved the land no more than the bank loved the land. He could not admire the tractor, its machined surfaces, its surge of power, the roar of its detonating cylinders, but it was not his tractor. Behind the tractor rolled the shining discs, cutting the earth with blades, not plowing but surgery, pushing the cut earth to the right where the second row of discs cut it and pushed it to the left. Slicing blades, shining, polished the cut earth, and pulled behind the discs, the harrows combing with iron teeth so that the little clods broke up and the earth lay smooth. Behind the harrows, the long cedars, 12 curved iron peans erected in the foundry, orgasms set by gears, raping methodically, raping without passion. The driver sat in his iron seat and he was proud of the straight lines he did not will, proud of the tractor he did not own or love, proud of the power he could not control. And when that crop grew and was harvested, no man had crumbled a hot clod in his fingers and let the earth sift past his fingertips. No man had touched the seed or lusted for the growth. Men ate what they had not raised, had no connection with the bread. And the land bore under iron, and under iron gradually died, for it was not loved or hated. It had no prayers or curses. At noon the tractor driver stopped, sometimes near a tenant house, and opened his lunch. Sandwiches wrapped in waxed paper, white bread, pickle, cheese, spam, a piece of pie branded like an engine part. He ate without relish, and tenants not yet moved away came out to see him, looked curiously while the goggles were taken off and the rubber dust mask, leaving white circles around the eyes and a large white circle around the nose and mouth. The exhaust of the tractor puttered on, for fuel is so cheap it is more efficient to leave the engine running than to heat the diesel nose for a new start. Curious children crowded close, ragged children who ate their fried dough as they watched. They watched hungrily the unwrapping of the sandwiches, and their hunger-sharpened nose smelled the pickle, cheese, and spam. They didn't speak to the driver. They watched his hand as it carried food to his mouth. They did not watch him chewing. Their eyes followed the hand that held the sandwich. After a while, the tenant who could not leave the place came out and squatted in the shade beside the tractor. "Why, you're Joe Davis, boy." "Sure," the driver said. "Well, what you doing this kind of work for against your own people?" $3 a day. I got damn sick of creeping for my dinner and not getting it. I got a wife and kids. We got to eat. $3 a day, and it comes every day." That's right, the tenant said. Before your $3 a day, 15 or 20 families can't eat at all. Nearly 100 people have to go out and wander on the roads for your $3 a day. Is that right? And the driver said, can't think of that. Got to think of my own kids. $3 a day, and it comes every day. Times are changing, mister. Don't you know? Can't make a living on the land unless you've got 2, 5, 10,000 acres and a tractor. Cropland isn't for little guys like us anymore. You don't kick up a howl because you can't make fours or because you're not the telephone company. Well, crops are like that now. Nothing to do about it. You try to get $3 a day someplace. That's the only way. The tenant pondered. Funny thing how it is, if a man owns a little property, that property is him, it's part of him, and it's like him. If he owns property only so he can walk on it and handle it and be sad when it isn't doing well and feel fine when the rain falls on it, that property is him. In some way he's bigger because he owns it. Even if he isn't successful, he's big with his property. That is so. And the tenant pondered, man. And the tenant, goddamn, and the tenant pondered more. But let a man get property he doesn't see or can't take time to get his fingers in or can't be there to walk on it, why then the property is the man. He can't do what he wants. He can't think what he wants. The property is the man, stronger than he is, and he is small, not big. Only his possessions are big, and he's the servant of his property. That is so too. The driver munched the branded pie and threw the crust away. Times are changed, don't you know? Thinking about stuff like that don't feed the kids. Get your $3 a day. Feed your kids. You got no call to worry about anybody's kids but your own. You get a reputation for talking like that, and you'll never get $3 a day. Big shots won't give you $3 a day if you worry about anything but your $3 a day. Nearly 100 people on the road for your $3 a day. Where will we go? And that reminds me, the driver said. You better get out soon. I'm going through the dooryard after dinner. You filled in the well this morning. I know. I had to keep the line straight. But I'm going through the dooryard after dinner. Got to keep the line straight. And well, you know, Joe Davis, my old man, so I'll tell you this. I got order wherever there's a family not moved out. If I have an accident, you know, get too close and cave the house in a little, well, I might get a couple of dollars. And my youngest kid never had no shoes yet. I built it with my hands, straightened old nails to put the sheeting on. Rafters are wired to the stringers with baling wire. It's mine. I built it. You bumped it down. I'll be in the window with a rifle. You even come too close and I'll pot you like a rabbit. It's not me. There's nothing I can do. I'll lose my job if I don't do it. And look, suppose you kill me. They'll just hang you. But long before you are hung, there'll be another guy on the tractor. And he'll bump the house down. You're not killing the right guy. That's so, the tenant said. Who gave you orders? I'll go after him. He's the one I'll kill. You're wrong. He got his orders from the bank. The bank told him, clear those people out, or it's your job. Well, there's a president of the bank. There's a board of directors. I'll fill up the magazine and the rifle and go into the bank, the driver said. Fellow was telling me the bank gets orders from the east. The orders were, make the land show profit or we'll close you up. But where does it stop? Who can we shoot? I don't aim to starve to death before I kill the man that's starving me. I don't know. Maybe there's nobody to shoot. Maybe the thing isn't men at all. Maybe, like you said, the property's doing it. Anyway, I told you my orders. I got to figure, the tenant said. We all got to figure. There's some way to stop this. It's not lightning or earthquakes. We've got a bad thing made by man, and by God, that's something we can change. The tenant sat in his doorway, and the driver thundered his engine and started off. Tracks falling and curving, harrows combing, and the phalli of the cedar slipping into the ground. Across the dooryard the tractor cut, and the hard, foot-beaten ground was seeded field, and the tractor cut through again. The uncut space was 10 feet wide. And back he came. The iron guard bit into the house corner, crumbled the wall, and wrenched the little house from its foundation so that it fell sideways, crushed like a bug. And the driver was goggled and rubber mask covered his nose and mouth. The tractor cut a straight line on, and the air and the ground vibrated with its thunder. The tenant man stared after it, the rifle in his hand. His wife was beside him, the quiet children behind, and all of them stared after the tractor. The houses were left vacant on the land, and the land was vacant because of this. Only the tractor sheds of corrugated iron, silver, and gleaming were alive, and they were alive with metal and gasoline and oil, the discs of the plows shining. The tractors had lights shining, for there is no day and no night for a tractor, and the discs turn the earth in the darkness, and they glitter in the daylight. And when a horse stops work and goes into the barn, there is a life and a vitality left. There is a breathing and a warmth, and the feet shift on the straw, and the jaws chomp on the hay. And the ears and the eyes are alive. There is a warmth of life in the barn, and the heat and smell of life. But when the motor of a tractor stops, it is as dead as the ore it came from. The heat goes out of it like living heat that leaves a corpse. Then the corrugated iron doors are closed, and the tractor man drives home to town, perhaps 20 miles away, and he need not come back for weeks or months, for the tractor is dead. And this is easy and efficient, so easy that the wonder goes out of the work, so efficient that the wonder goes out of the land and the working of it, and with the wonder, the deep understanding and relation. And in the tractor man there grows the contempt that comes only to a stranger who has a little understanding and no relation. For nitrates are not the land, nor phosphates, and the length of the fiber in the cotton is not the land. Carbon is not man, nor salt, nor water, nor calcium. He is all of these, but he is much more, much more. And the land is so much more than its analysis. The man who was more than his chemistry, walking on the earth, turning his plow point for a stone, dropping his handles to slide over an outcropping, kneeling in the earth to eat his lunch, that man who is more than his elements knows the land that is more than its analysis. But the machine man, driving a dead tractor on land he does not own and love, understands only chemistry, and he is contemptuous of the land and of himself. When the corrugated iron doors are shut, he goes home, and his home is not the land. The doors of the empty houses swung open and drifted back and forth in the wind. Bands of little boys came out from the towns to break the windows and to pick over the debris looking for treasure. And here's a knife with half a blade gone. That's a good thing. And smells like a rat died here. And look what Whitey wrote on the wall. He wrote that in the toilet school too, and teacher made him wash it off. When the folks first left and the evening of the first day came, the hunting couch slouched in from the fields and mewed over the porch. And when no one came out, the caps crept through the open doors and walked mewing through the empty rooms. And they went back to the fields and were wild cats from then on, hunting gophers and field mice and sleeping in ditches in the daytime. When the night came, the bats, which had stopped at the doors for fear of light, swooped into the houses and sailed about through the empty rooms. And in a little while they stayed in dark room corners during the day, folded their wings high, and hung head down among the rafters. And the smell of their droppings was in the empty houses. And the mice moved in and stored weeds, seeds in corners and boxes in the backs of drawers and kitchens. And weasels came in to hunt the mice, and the brown owls flew shrieking in and out again. Now there came a little shower. The weeds sprang up in front of the doorstep where they had not been allowed, and grass grew up from the porch boards. The houses were vacant, and a vacant house falls quickly apart. Split started up the sheathing from the rusted nails. A dust settled on the floors, and only mouse and weasel and cat tracks disturbed it. On a night the wind loosened the shingle and flapped it to the ground. The next wind pried into the hole where the shingle had been, lifted off 3, then next a dozen. The midday sun burned through the hole and threw a glaring spot on the floor. The wild cats crept in from the field at night, but they did not mew at the doorstep any more. They moved like shadows of a cloud across the moon into the rooms to hunt the mice. And on windy nights the doors banged and the ragged curtains fluttered in the broken windows. The western land nervous under the beginning change. The western states nervous as horses before a thunderstorm. The great owners nervous, sensing a change, knowing nothing of the nature of the change. The great owners striking at the immediate thing, the widening government, the growing labor unity, striking at new taxes, at plans, not knowing these things are results, not causes. Results, not causes. Results, not causes. The causes lie deep, and simply the cause are a hunger in a stomach multiplied 1,000,000 times, a hunger in a single soul, hunger for joy and some security multiplied 1,000,000 times, muscle and mind aching to grow, to work, to create, multiplied 1,000,000 times. The last clear definite function of man, muscles aching to work, minds aching to create beyond the single need. This is man. To build a wall, to build a house, a dam, and in the wall and house and dam to put something of man itself, and to man's self to take back something of the wall, the house, the dam, to take hard muscles from the lifting, to take the clear lines and form from conceiving. For man, unlike any other thing organic or inorganic in the universe, grows beyond his work, walks up the stairs of his concepts, emerges ahead of his accomplishments. This you may say of man, when theories change and crash, when schools, philosophy, when narrow dark alleys of thought, national, religious, economic, grow and disintegrate, man reaches, stumble forward painfully, mistakenly sometimes. Having stepped forward he may slip back, but only half a step, never the full step back. This you may say, and know it, and know it. This you may know when the bombs plummet out of the black plains on the marketplace, when prisoners are stuck like pigs, when the crushed bodies drain filthily in the dust. You may know it in this way. If the step were not to being taken, and the stumbling forward ache were not alive, the bombs would not fall, the throats would not be cut. Fear the time when the bombs stop falling while the bombers live, for every bomb is proof that the spirit has not died. And fear the time when the strikes stop when the great owners live, for every little beaten strike is proof that the step is being taken. And this you can know, fear the time when man's self will not suffer and die for a concept, for this one quality is the foundation of man's self, and this one quality is man, distinctive in the universe. The western states nervous under the beginning change, Texas and Oklahoma, Kansas and Arkansas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. A single family moved from the land. Pa borrowed money from the bank, and now the bank wants the land. The land company, that's not the bank when it has land, wants tractors, not families on the land. Is a tractor bad? Is the power that turns the long furrows wrong? If this tractor were ours, it would be good, not mine, but ours. If our tractor turned the long furrows of our land, it would be good, not my land, but ours. We could love the tractor then, as we have loved this land when it was ours. But this tractor does two things. It turns the land, and it turns us off the land. There is little difference between this tractor and a tank. The people are driven, intimidated, hurt by both. We must think about this. One man, one family driven from the land. This rusty car creaking along the highway to the west. I lost my land. A single tractor took my land. I am alone and I am bewildered. And in the night, one family camps in a ditch and another family pulls in and the tents come out. The two men squat on their hams and the women and children listen. Here is the node. You who hate change and fear revolution. Keep these two squatting men apart. Make them hate, fear, suspect each other. Here is the analogy of the thing you fear. This is the zygote. For here, I lost my land is changed. A cell is split, and from its splitting grows the thing you hate. We lost our land. The danger is here, for two men are not as lonely and perplexed as one. And from this first we, there grows a still more dangerous thing. I have a little food, plus I have none. If from this problem the sum is we have a little food, the only thing on its way, the movement, has direction. Only a little multiplication now, and this land, this tractor are ours. The two men squatting in a ditch, the little fire, the side meat stewing in a single pot, the silent, stone-eyed woman behind the children listening with their souls to words their minds do not understand. The night draws down. The baby has a cold. Here, take this blanket. It's wool. It was my mother's blanket. Take it for the baby. This is the thing to bomb. This is the beginning. From I to we. If you who own the things people must have could understand this, you might preserve yourself. If you could separate causes from results, if you could know that pain, marks, Jefferson, Lenin were results, not causes. You might survive, but that you cannot know. For the quality of owning freezes you forever into I and cuts you off forever from the we. The Western states are nervous under the beginning change. Need is the stimulus to concept, concept to action. 500,000 people moving over the country, 1,000,000 more restive, ready to move, 10 million more feeding the first nervousness, and tractors turning the multiple furrows in the vacant land. Look, said the man, it don't make no sense. This fella wants 800 men. So we prints up 5,000 of them things and maybe 20,000 people sees them and maybe 2-3,000 folks get moving on account of this here handbill. Folks that's crazy with worry. But it don't make no sense, Pa cried. Not till you see the fella that put out this here bill. You'll see him or somebody that's working for him. You'll be a camping by a ditch, you and 50 other families. And he'll look in your tent and see if you got anything left to eat. And if you got nothing, he says, want a job? And you'll say, I sure do, mister. I sure thank you for a chance to do some work. And he'll say, I can use you. And you'll say, when do I start? And he'll tell you where to go and what time. And then he'll go, maybe he needs 200 men. So he talks to 500. And then they tell other folks. And when you get to the place, there's 1,000 men. This here fella says, I'm paying 20 cents an hour, and maybe half of the men walk off, but they still 500 that's so goddamn hungry they'll work for nothing but biscuits. Well, this here fella's got a contract to pick them peaches or chop that cotton. You see now? The more fellas he can get and the hungrier, less he's gonna pay. And he'll get a fella with kids if he can, 'cause hell, I says I wasn't gonna fret you. The circle of faces looks coldly at him. The eyes tested his words. The ragged man grew self-conscious. I says I wasn't gonna fret you, and here I am a-doing it. You gonna go on. You ain't going back. The silence hung on the porch, and the light hissed, and the halo of moths swung around and around the lantern. The ragged man went on nervously. Let me tell you what to do when you meet the fella that says he got work. Let me tell you. Ask him what he's gonna pay. Ask him to write that down, what he's gonna pay you. Ask him that. And tell him you're going to get fooled if you don't. The proprietor leaned forward in his chair. Better to see the raggedy, dirty man. He scratched among the gray hairs on his chest. He said coldly, You sure you ain't one of these here troublemakers? You sure you ain't a labor faker? And the ragged man cried, I swear to God I ain't. There's plenty of 'em, the proprietor said, going around stirring up trouble, getting folks mad, chiseling in. They's plenty of 'em. Time's gonna come when we string 'em all up. All them troublemakers. We gonna run 'em out of the country. Man wants work? Okay. If he don't, to hell with him. We ain't gonna let him stir up trouble. The ragged man drew himself up. I tried to tell you folks, he said. Something it took me a year to find out. Took 2 kids dead, took my wife dead to show me. But I can't tell you. I should have knew that. Nobody couldn't tell me neither. I can't tell you about them little fellas laying in the tent with their bellies puffed out and just skin on their bones and shivering and whimpering like pups, and me running around trying to get work, not for money, not for wages. He shouted, Jesus Christ, just a cup of flour and a spoon of lard. And then the coroner come. Them children died of heart failure, he said. Put it on his paper. Shivering they was, and their bellies stuck out like a pig bladder. The circle was quiet, and the mouths were open a little. The men breathed shallowly and watched. The ragged man looked around the circle, and then he turned and walked quickly away into the darkness. The dark swallowed him, but his dragging footsteps could be heard. Where's home? Tom asked. Panhandle? Come from near Pampa? Pa asked. Can you make a living there? Nope. But at least we can starve to death with folks we know. Won't have a bunch of fellas that hates us to starve with, Pa said. You know, you're the second fella that talked like that. What makes 'em hate you? Dunno, said the man. He cupped his hands full of water and rubbed his face, snorting and bubbling. Dusty water ran out of his hair and streaked his neck. I'd like to hear some more about this, said Pa. Me too, Tom added. Why these folks out west hate you? The man looked sharply at Tom. You just going west? Just on our way. You ain't never been to California? No, we ain't. Well, don't take my word, go see for yourself. Yeah, Tom said. But a fella kinda likes to know what he's getting into. Well, if you truly want to know, I'm a fella that's asks questions and give her some thought. She's a nice country, but she was stole a long time ago. You get across the desert and come into the country round Bakersfield, and you never seen such a purty country. All orchards and grapes, purtiest country you ever seen. And you'll pass land flat and fine with water 30 feet down, and that's land's laying fallow. But you can't have none of that land. That's a land and cattle company. And if they don't want to work her, she ain't gonna get worked. You go in there and plant you a little corn, and you'll go to jail. Good land, you say, and they ain't working her? Yes, sir. Good land, and they ain't. Well, sir, that'll get you a little mad, but you ain't seen nothing. People gonna have a look in their eye. They're gonna look at you in their face and says, I don't like you, you son of a bitch. Gonna be deputy and sheriffs. And they'll push you around. You camp on the roadside and they'll move you on. You're gonna see people's face how they hate you. And I'll tell you something. They hate you 'cause they're scared. They know a hungry fella gonna get food even if he got to take it. They know that fallow land's a sin and somebody's gonna take it. What the hell, you never been called Okie yet? Tom said, Okie, what's that? Well, Okie used to mean you was from Oklahoma. Now it means you're a dirty son of a bitch. Okie means you're scum. Don't mean nothing itself. It's the way they say it. But I can't tell you nothing. You got to go there. I hear there's 300,000 of our people there and living like hogs 'cause everything in California is owned. There ain't nothing left. And them people that owns it gonna hang on to it if they got to kill everybody in the world to do it. And they're scared, and that makes them mad. You got to see it. You got to hear it. Purtiest goddamn country you ever seen. But they ain't nice to you, them folks. They're so scared, ain't worried, they ain't even nice to each other. Tom looked down into the water and he dug his heels into the sand. Suppose a fella got work and saved. Couldn't he get a little land? The older man laughed and looked at his boy, and the silent boy grinned almost in triumph. And the man said, You ain't gonna get no steady work. Gonna scrabble for your dinner every day. And you're gonna do her with people looking mean at you. Pick cotton and you're gonna be sure the scales ain't honest. Some of 'em is and some of 'em ain't. But you gonna think all the scales is crooked and you don't know which ones. Ain't nothing you can do about her anyways. Pa asked slowly. Ain't it nice out there at all? Sure nice to look at, but you can't have none of it. There's a grove of yellow oranges and a guy with a gun that got the right to kill you if you touch one. There's a newspaper fella near the coast, got 1,000,000 acres. Casey looked up quickly. 1,000,000 acres? What in the world can he do with 1,000,000 acres? I don't know, he just got it. Runs a few cattle, got guards, every place to keep folks out. Rides around in a bulletproof car. I seen pictures of him. Fat, soft fella with little mean eyes and a mouth like a little asshole. Scared he's gonna die. Got 1,000,000 acres and scared of dying. Casey demanded. What in the hell can he do with 1,000,000 acres? What's he want 1,000,000 acres for? The man took his whitening, pluckering hands out of the water and spread them, and he tightened his lower lip and bent his head down to one shoulder. I don't know, he said. Guess he's crazy. Must be crazy. Seen a picture of him. He looks crazy. Crazy and mean. Say he's scared to die? Casey asked. That's what I heard. Scared God'll get him? I don't know. Just scared. What's he care? Pa said. Don't seem like he's having no fun. Grandpa wasn't scared. When Grandpa was having the most fun, he come closest to getting killed. Tom, Grandpa, and another fellow wanged into a bunch of Navajo. In the night, they was having the time of their life. And same time, you wouldn't give a gopher for their chance. Casey said, Seems like that's the way. Fella having fun. He don't give a damn. But a fella mean and lonely and old and disappointed, he's scared of dying. Pa asked, What's he disappointed about if he got 1,000,000 acres? The preacher smiled and looked puzzled. He splashed a floating water bug away with his hands. If he needs 1,000,000 acres to make him feel rich, seems to me like he needs it 'cause he feels awful poor inside himself. And if he's poor in himself, there ain't no 1,000,000 acres gonna make him feel rich. And maybe he's disappointed that nothing he can do will make him feel rich. Not rich like Miss Wilson was when she gave her tent when Grandpa died. I ain't trying to preach no sermon, but I never seen nobody this busy as a prairie dog collecting stuff that wasn't disappointed. He grinned. Does kind of sound like a sermon, don't it? Once California belonged to Mexico, and his land to Mexicans, and a horde of tattered, feverish Americans poured in. And such was their hunger for land, And they took the land, stole Sutter's land, Guerrero's land, took the grants and broke them up and growled and quarreled over them, those frantic, hungry men, and they guarded with guns the land they had stolen. They put up houses and barns, they turned the earth and planted crops, and these things were possession, and possession was ownership. The Mexicans were weak and fed. They could not resist because they wanted nothing in the world as frantically as the Americans wanted the land. Then, with time, the squatters were no longer squatters, but owners, and their children grew up and had children on the land, and the hunger was gone from them, the feral hunger, the gnawing, tearing hunger for the land, for water and earth and good sky over it, for the green thrusting grass, for the swelling roots. They had these things so completely that they did not know about them any more. They had no more the stomach-tearing lust for a rich acre and a shining blade to plow it, for seed and windmill beating its wings in the air. They arose in the dark no more to hear the sleepy birds first chittering, and the morning wing around the house. They waited for the first light to go out to the dear acres. These things were lost and the crops were reckoned. In dollars and land has valued by principal plus interest, and crops were bought and sold before they were planted. Then crop failure, drought. The flood were no longer little deaths within life, but simple losses of money. And all their love was thinned with money, and all their fierceness dribbled away in interest until they were no longer farmers at all, but little shopkeepers of crops, little manufacturers who must sell before they can make. Then those farmers who were not good shopkeepers lost their land to good shopkeepers. No matter how clever, how loving a man might be with the earth and growing things, he could not survive if he were not also a good shopkeeper. And as time went on, the businessmen had the farms, and the farms grew larger, but there were fewer of them. Now farming became an industry, and the owners followed Rome, although they did not know it. They imported slaves, although they did not call them slaves. Chinese, Japanese, Mexicans, Filipinos. They live on rice and beans, the businessmen said. They don't need much. They wouldn't know what to do with these good wages. Why, look how they live. Why, look what they eat. And if they get funny, deport them. And all the time the farms grew larger and the owners fewer, and there were pitifully few farmers on the land anymore. And the imported serfs were beaten and frightened and starved until some went home again, and some grew fierce and were killed or driven from the country, and the farms grew larger and the owners fewer. And the crops changed. Fruit trees took the place of grain fields, and vegetables to feed the world spread out on the bottoms. Lettuce, cauliflower, artichokes, potatoes, stoop crops. A man may stand to use a scythe, a plow, a pitchfork, but he must crawl like a bug between the rows of lettuce. He must bend his back and pull his long bag between the cotton rows. He must go on his knees like a penitent across a cauliflower patch. And it came about that owners no longer worked on their farms. They farmed on paper, and they forgot the land, the smell, the feel of it, and remembered only that they owned it, remembered only what they gained and lost by it. And some of the farms grew so large that one man could not even conceive of them anymore, so large that it took batteries of bookkeepers to keep track of interest and gain and loss, chemists to test the soil to replenish, straw bosses to see what the stooping men were moving along the rows as swiftly as the material of their bodies could stand. Then such a farmer really became a storekeeper and kept the store. He paid the men and sold them food and took the money back, and after a while he did not pay the men at all and saved bookkeeping. These farms gave food on credit. A man might work and feed himself, and when the work was done he might find that he owed money to the company, and the owners not only did not work the farms anymore, many of them have never seen the farms that they owned. And then the dispossessed were drawn west, from Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, from Nevada and Arkansas. Families, tribes, dusted out, tractored out. Carloads, caravans, homeless and hungry, 20,000 and 50,000 and 100,000 and 200,000. They streamed over the mountains, hungry and restless, restless as ants, scurrying to find work to do, to lift, to push, to pull, to pick, to cut, anything, any burden to bear, for food. The kids are hungry. We got no place to live, like ants scurrying for work, for food, and most of all, for land. We ain't foreign, 7 generations back Americans. And beyond that, Irish, Scottish, English, German. One of our folks in the Revolution, and there was lots of our folks in the Civil War, both sides, Americans. They were hungry and they were fierce, and they had hoped to find a home, and they found only hatred. Okies. The owners hated them because the owners knew they were soft and the Okies strong. And they were fed and the Okies hungry. And perhaps the owners had heard from their grandfathers how easy it is to steal land from a soft man if you are fierce and hungry and armed. The owners hated them, and in the towns the storekeepers hated them because they had no money to spend. There was no shorter path to a storekeeper's contempt, and all his admirations are exactly opposite. The town men, little bankers, hated Okies because there was nothing to gain from them. They had nothing. And the laboring people hated Okies because a hungry man must work. And if he must work, if he has to work, the wage payer automatically gives him less for his work, and then no one can get more. And then, dispossessed, the migrants flowed into California, 250,000 and 300,000. Behind them, new tractors were going on the land and the tenants were being forced off, and new waves were on the way, new waves of the dispossessed and the homeless, hardened, intent, and dangerous. And while the Californians wanted many things, accumulation, social success, amusement, luxury, and curious banking security, and the new barbarians wanted only two things, land and food. And to them, the two were one. And whereas the wants of the Californians were nebulous and undefined, the wants of the Okies were beside the roads, lying there to be seen and coveted, the good fields with water to be dug, for the good green fields, earth to crumble experimentally in the hand, grass to smell, oaten stalks to chew until the sharp sweetness was in the throat. A man might look at a fallow field and know, and see in his mind that his own bending back and his own straining arms would bring the cabbages into light, and the golden eating corn, the turnips and carrots. And a homeless, hungry man driving the road with his wife beside him and his thin children in the back seat could look at the fallow fields which might produce food but not profit, and that man could know how a fallow field is a sin, and the unused land is a crime against the thin children. And such a man drove along the roads and knew temptation at every field, and knew the lust to take these fields and make them grow strength for his children and a little comfort for his wife. The temptation was before him always, the fields goaded him, and the company ditches with good water flowing were a goad to him. And in the south he saw the golden oranges hanging on the trees, the little golden oranges on the dark green trees, and guards with shotguns patrolling the lines so a man might not pick an orange for a thin child, oranges to be dumped if the price was low. He drove his old car into a town. He scoured the farms for work. Where can we sleep the night? Well, there's Hooverville on the edge of the river. There's a whole raft of Okies there. He drove his old car to Hooverville. He never asked again, for there was a Hooverville on the edge of every town. The rag town lay close to the water, and the houses were tents, and the weed-thatched enclosures, paper houses, a great junk pile. The man drove his family in and became a citizen of Hooverville. Always they were called Hooverville. The man put up his own tent as near to water as he could get, or if he had no tent, he went to the city dump and brought back cartons and built a house of corrugated paper. And when the rains came and the house melted and washed away, he settled in Hooverville. And he scoured the countryside for work, and the little money he had went for gasoline to look for work. In the evening the men gathered and talked together. Squatting on their hams, they talked of the land they had seen. There's 30,000 acres out west of here, laying there. Jesus, what I could do with that. With 5 acres of that, why hell, I'd have everything to eat. Notice one thing, there ain't no vegetables, nor chickens, nor pigs at the farms. They raise one thing, cotton, say, or peaches, or lettuce. Another place will be all chickens. They buy the stuff they could raise in the dooryard. Jesus, what I could do with a couple pigs. Well, it ain't yourn, and it ain't gonna be yourn. What we gonna do? The kids can't grow up this way. In the camps, the word would come whispering. There's work a shafter. And the cars would be loaded in the night, the highways crowded, a gold rush for work. At Shafter, the people would pile up, 5 times too many to do the work. A gold rush for work. They stole away in the night, frantic for work. And along the roads lay the temptations, the fields that could bear food. That's owned. That ain't ourn. Well, maybe we could get a little piece of her. Maybe a little piece, right down there, a patch. Jimson weed now. Christ, I could get enough potatoes off that and a little patch to feed my whole family. It ain't ourn. It got to have Jimson weed. Now and then a man tried, crept on the land and cleared a piece, trying like a thief to steal a little richness from the earth. Secret gardens hidden in the weeds, a package of carrot seeds and a few turnips, planted potato skins, crept out in the evening secretly to hoe in the stolen earth. Leave the weeds around the edge, then nobody can see what we're doing. Leave some weeds, big and tall ones in the middle. Secret gardening in the evenings, and water carried in a rusty can. And then one day a deputy sheriff. Well, what you think you're doing? I ain't doing no harm. I had my eye on you. This ain't your land, you're trespassing. The land ain't plowed, and I ain't hurting none. You goddamn squatters, pretty soon you'd think you owned it. You'd be sore as hell, think you owned it. Get off now. And the little green carrot tops were kicked off, and the turnip greens trampled, and the Jimson weed moved back in. But the cop was right. A crop raised, why, that makes ownership. Land hoed and the carrots eaten. A man might fight for the land he's taken food from. Get him off quick. He'll think he owns it. He might even die fighting for the little plot among Jimson weed. Did you see his face when we kicked them turnips out? Why, he'd kill a fella soon as he'd look at 'em. We got to keep these here people down or they'll take the country. They'll take the country. Outlanders. Foreigners. Sure, they talk the same language, but they ain't the same. Look how they live. Think any of us folks live like that? Hell no. In the evening, squatting and talking. And an excited man. Why ain't 20 of us take a piece of land? We got guns. Take it and say, put us off if you can. Why ain't we do that? They'd just shoot us like rats. Well, which would you rather be, dead or here? Underground or in a house all made of gunny sacks? Which would you rather for your kids, dead now or dead in 2 years with what they call malnutrition? Know what we eat all week? Boiled nettles and fried dough. Know where we got the flour for the dough? Swept the floor of a boxcar. Talking in the camps and the deputies' fat-ass men with guns slung on fat hips, swaggering through the camps. Give 'em something to think about. Got to keep 'em in line or Christ only knows what they'll do. Why, Jesus, they're as dangerous as niggers in the South. If they ever get together, there ain't nothing that'll stop 'em. Quote, in Lawrenceville, a deputy sheriff evicted a squatter, and the squatter resisted, making it necessary for the officer to use force. The 11-year-old son of the squatter shot and killed the deputy with a .22 rifle. Rattlesnakes. Don't take chances with them, and if they argue, shoot first. If a kid'll kill a cop, what'll the men do? Thing is, get tougher than they are. Treat 'em rough. Scare 'em. What if they won't scare? What if they stand up and take it and shoot back? These men were armed, and they were children. A gun is an extension of themselves. What if they won't scare? What if sometime an army of them marches on the land and the Lombards did in Italy, and the Germans did on Gaul, and the Turks did on Byzantium? They were land-hungry, ill-armed hordes too, and the legions could not stop them. Slaughter and terror did not stop them. How can you frighten a man whose hunger is not only in his own cramped stomach, but in the wretched bellies of his children? You can't scare him. He has known a fear beyond every other. In Hooverville, the men talking. Grandpa took his land from the Injuns. Now this ain't right. We're a-talking here. This here you're talking about is stealing. I ain't no thief. No, you stole a bottle of milk from a porch night before last, and you stole some copper wire and sold it for a piece of meat. Yeah, but the kids was hungry. It's stealing, though. Know how the Fairfield ranch was got? I'll tell you. It was all government land and could be took up. Old Fairfield, he went into San Francisco to the bars and he got him 300 stew bums. The bums took up the land. Fairfield kept them in food and whiskey, and when they proved the land, Fairfield took it from him. He used to say the land cost him a pint of rot gut an acre. Would you say that was stealing? Well, it wasn't right, but he never went to jail for it. No, he never went to jail for it. And the fella that put a boat in a wagon and made his report like it was all underwater, 'cause he went in a boat, he never went to jail either. And the fellas that bribed congressmen in the legislatures never went to jail either. All over the state, jabbering in Hoovervilles. And the raids, the swoop of armed deputies on the squatters' camps. Get out! Department of Health orders. This camp is a menace to health. Where are we gonna go? That's none of our business. We got orders to keep you out of here. In half an hour, we set fire to the camp. They's typhoid down the line. You want to spread it all over? We got orders to get you out of here. Now get. In half an hour, we burn the camp. In half an hour, we smoke. In half an hour, the smoke of paper houses, of weed-thatched huts rising in the sky, and the people in their cars rolling over the highways looking for another Hooverville. And in Kansas and Arkansas, in Oklahoma and Texas and New Mexico, the tractors move in and push the tenants out. 300,000 in California and more are coming. And in California, the road's full of frantic people running like ants to pull, to push, to lift, to work. For every man load to lift, 5 pairs of arms extended to lift it. For every stomach full of food available, 5 mouths open. And the great owners who must lose their land in an upheaval, the great owners with access to history, with eyes to read history, and to know the great fact. When property accumulates in too few hands, it is taken away. And that companion fact. When a majority of the people are hungry and cold, they will take by force what they need. And the little screaming fact that sounds through all history, repression works only to strengthen and knit the repressed. The great owners ignored the 3 cries of history. The land fell into fewer hands and the number of the dispossessed increased. And every effort of the great owners was direct at repression. The money was spent for arms, for gas to protect the great holdings, and spies were sent to catch the murmuring of revolt so that it might be stamped out. The changing economy was ignored, plans for the change ignored, and only means to destroy revolt were considered, while the causes of revolt went on. The tractors which throw men out of work, the belt lines which carry loads, the machines which produce, all were increased, and more families scampered on the highways looking for crumbs of the great holdings, lusting after the land beside the roads. The great owners formed association for protection, and they met to discuss ways to intimidate, to kill, to gas, and always they were in fear of a principle, 300,000. If they ever move under a leader, the end. 300,000, hungry and miserable, and if they ever know themselves, the land will be theirs and all the gas, and all the rifles in the world won't stop them. And the great owners who had become through their holdings, both more and less than men, ran to their destruction, and used every means that in a long run would destroy them. Every little means, every violence, every raid on a Hooverville, every deputy swaggering through a ragged camp put off the day a little cement the inevitability of the day. The men squatted on their hams, sharp-faced men, lean from hunger and hard from resisting in, sullen eyes and hard jaws, and the rich land was around them. "Did you hear about the kid in the 4th tent down?" "No, I just came in." "Well, that kid's been crying in his sleep and a-rolling in his sleep. Them folks thought he got worms, so they give him a blaster and he died. It was what they call black tongue the kid had. Comes from not getting good things to eat. Poor little fella. Yeah, but them folks can't bury him. Got to go out the country stone orchard." "Well, hell," and hands went into pockets and little coins came out. In front of the tent a little heap of silver grew, and the family found it there. "Our people are good people. Our people are kind people. Pray God someday kind people won't all be poor. Pray God someday a kid can eat." And the association of owners knew that someday the praying would stop. And there's the end. The moving, questing people were migrants now, those families which had lived on a little piece of land, who had lived and died on 40 acres, had eaten or starved on the produce of 40 acres, and now the whole West to rove in. And they scampered about, looking for work, and the highways were streams of people, and the ditch banks were lines of people. Behind them more were coming. The great highways streamed with moving people. There in the middle and southwest had lived the simple agrarian folk who had not changed with industry, who had not formed with machines or known the power and danger of machines in private hands. They had not grown up in the paradoxes of industry. Their senses were still sharp to the ridiculousness of the industrial life. And then suddenly the machines pushed them out and they swarmed on the highways. The movement changed them. The highways, the camps along the road, the fear of hunger and the hunger itself changed them. The children without dinner changed them. The endless moving changed them. They were migrants and the hostility changed them, welded them, united them. Hostility that made them little towns and and arm as though to repel an invader, squads with pick handles, clerks and storekeepers with shotguns, guarding the word against their own people. In the West, there was a panic when the migrants multiplied on the highways. Men of poverty were terrified for their property. Men of property were terrified for their property. Men who had never been hungry saw the eyes of the hungry. Men who had never wanted anything very much saw the flare and the want of the eyes of the migrants. And the men of the towns and of the soft suburban country gathered to defend themselves, and they reassured themselves that they were good and the invaders bad. And a man must do before he fights, they said. These goddamn Okies are dirty and ignorant. They're degenerate sexual maniacs. These goddamn Okies are thieves. They'll steal anything. They've got no sense of property rights. And the latter was true, for how can a man without property know the ache of ownership? And the defending people said, they bring disease. They're filthy. We can't have them in the schools. They're strangers. How'd you like to have your sister go out with one of them? The local people whipped themselves into a mold of cruelty. Then they formed units, squads, and armed them with clubs, with gas, with guns. We own the country. We can't let these Okies get out of hand. And the men who were armed did not own the land, but they thought they did. And the clerks who drilled at night owned nothing. And the little storekeepers possessed only a drawer full of debts. But even a debt is something. Even a job is something. The clerk thought, I get $15 a week. Suppose a goddamn Okie would work for 12. And the little storekeeper thought, how could I compete with a debtless man? And the migrants streamed in and on the highways, and their hunger was in their eyes, and the need was in their eyes. They had no argument, no system, nothing but their numbers and their needs. When there was work for a man, 10 men fought for it, fought with a low wage. And that fellow will work for 30 cents. I'll work for 25. If he'll take 25, I'll do it for 20. No, me, I'm hungry. I'll work for 15. I'll work for food. The kids, you ought to see them little boils like coming out and they can't run around. Give them some windfall fruit and they bloat it up. Me, I'll work for a little piece of meat. And this was good, for wages went down and prices stayed up. The great owners were glad and they sent out more handbills to bring more people in, and wages went down and prices stayed up. And pretty soon, now we'll have serfs again. And now the great owners and the companies invented a new method. A great owner bought a cannery, and when the peaches and the pears were ripe, he cut the price of fruit below the cost of raising it. And as the cannery owner, he paid himself a low price for the fruit and kept the price of canned goods and took his profit. And the little farmers who owned no canneries lost their farms, and they were taken by the great owners, the banks, and the companies who also owned the canneries. As time went on, there were fewer farms. The little farmers moved into town for a while and exhausted their credit, exhausted their friends, their relatives. And when they too went on the highways, and the roads were crowded with men ravenous for work, murderous for work, and the companies, the banks worked at their own doom, and they did not know it. The fields were fruitful, and starving men moved on the roads. The granaries were full, and the children of the poor grew up rachitic. And the pustules of Pellagra swelled on their sides. The great companies did not know that the line between hunger and anger is a thin line, and money that might have gone to wages went for gas, for guns, for agents and spies, for blacklists, for drilling. On the highways, the people moved like ants and searched for work, for food, and the anger began to ferment. The migrant people, scuttling for work, scrabbling to live, looked away for pleasure, dug for pleasure, manufactured pleasure, and they were hungry for amusement. Sometimes amusement lay in speech, and they climbed up their lives with jokes. And they came about in the camps along the roads, on the ditch banks, beside the streams, under the sycamores. The storyteller grew into being, so that the people gathered in the low firelight to hear the gifted ones, and they listened while the tales were told, and their participation made the stories great. I was a recruit against Geronimo. And the people listened, and their quiet eyes reflected the dying fire. Them Injuns was cute, slick as snakes, and quiet when they wanted. Could go through dry leaves and make no rustle. Try to do that sometime. And the people listened and remembered the crash of dry leaves under their feet. Come the change of season and the clouds up, wrong time. Ever hear of the army doing anything right? Give the army 10 chances and they'll stumble along. Took 3 regiments to kill 100 braves, always. And the people listened, and their faces were quiet with listening. The storytellers, gathering attention into their tales, spoke in great rhythms, spoke in great words, because the tales were great, and the listeners become great through them. There was a brave on the ridge against the sun, knowing he stood out, spread his arms and stood, naked as morning and against the sun. Maybe he was crazy, I don't know, stood there, arms spread out, like a cross he looked. 400 yards, and the men, well, they raised their sights and they felt the wind with their fingertips, and then they just lay there and couldn't shoot. Maybe that Injun knowed something, knowed we couldn't shoot, just laid there with the rifles cocked and didn't even put 'em to our shoulders, looking at him. Headband, one feather, could see it, as naked as the sun. Long time we laid there, looked, and he never moved, and the captain got mad. "Shoot, you crazy bastard, shoot," he yells, and we just laid there. "I'll give you the 5 count and mark you down," the captain says. Well, sir, we put up our rifles slow, and every man hoped somebody shoot first. I ain't never been so sad in my life, and I laid my sights on his belly, 'cause you can't stop an Injun no other place, and then, well, he just plunked down and rolled, and we went up. And he wasn't big, he looked so grand up there, all tore to pieces and little. Ever see a cock pheasant, stiff and beautiful, ever feather drawn and painted, and even his eyes drawn and pretty? And bang, you pick him up, bloody and twisted, and you spoiled something better in you. And eating him don't never make it up to you, 'cause you spoiled something in yourself, and you can't never fix it up. And the people nodded, and perhaps the fire sputtered a little light and showed their eyes looking in on themselves. Against the sun with his arms out, and he looked big as God. The spring is beautiful in California. Valleys in which the fruit blossoms are fragrant, pink and white waters and shallow sea. Then the first tendrils of the grapes swelling from the old gnarled vines cascade down to cover the trunks. The full green hills are round and soft as breasts, and on the level vegetable lands are a mile-long rows of pale green lettuce, and the spindly little cauliflowers, the gray-green unearthly artichoke plants. And then the leaves break out on the trees, and the petals drop from fruit trees and carpet the earth with pink and white. The centers of the blossoms swell and grow in color, cherries and apples, peaches and pears, figs with which close the flower and the fruit. All California quickens with produce, and the fruit grows heavy, and the limbs bend gradually under fruit so that the little crutches must be placed under them to support the weight. Behind the fruitfulness are men of understanding and knowledge and skill, men who experiment with seed, endlessly developing the techniques for greater crops of plants, whose roots will resist the million enemies of the earth, the mold, the insects, the rust, the blights. These men work carefully and endlessly to perfect the seed, the roots. And there are the men of chemistry who spray the trees against pests, who sulfur the grapes, who cut out disease and rots, mildews and sickness, doctors of preventative medicine, men at the border who look for fruit flies, for Japanese beetle, men who quarantine the sick trees and root them out and burn them, men of knowledge. The men who graft the young trees, the little vines, are the cleverest of all, for theirs is a surgeon job, as tender and delicate, and these men must have surgeons' hands and surgeons' hearts to slit the bark, to place the grafts, to bind the wounds, and to cover them from the air. These are great men. Along the rows the cultivators moved, tearing the spring grass and turning it under to make a fertile earth, breaking the ground to hold the water up near a surface, ridging the ground in little pools for the irrigation, destroying the weed roots that may drink the water away from the trees. And all the time the fruit swells and the flowers break out in long clusters along the vines. And in the growing year the warmth grows and the leaves turn dark green. The prunes lengthen like little green bird eggs, and the limbs sag down against the crutches under the weight. And the hard little pears take shape, and the beginning of the fuzz comes out on the peaches. Grape blossoms shed their tiny petals, and the hard little beads become green buttons, and the buttons grow heavy. These men who work in the fields, the owners of the little orchards, watch and calculate. This year is heavy with produce, and men are proud. For their knowledge, they can make the year heavy. They have transformed the world with their knowledge. The short, lean wheat has been made big and productive. Little sour apples have grown large and sweet, and that old grape that grew among the trees and fed the birds in its tiny fruit has mothered 1,000 varieties, red and black, green and pale pink, purple and yellow, and each variety with its own flavor. The men who work in the experimental farms had made new fruits, nectarines, and 40 kinds of plums, walnuts with paper shells. In all ways they work, selecting, graphing, changing, driving themselves, driving the earth to produce. And the first cherries ripened, cent and a half a pound. Hell, we can't pick 'em for that. Black cherries and red cherries, full and sweet, and the birds eat half of each cherry, and the yellow jackets buzz into the holes the birds made, and on the ground the seed drop and dry with black shreds hanging from them. The purple prunes soften and sweeten. My God, we can't pick them and dry and sulfur them. We can't pay wages, no matter what wages, and the purple prunes carpet the ground, and first the skins wrinkle a little swarms of flies to come feast, and the valley is filled with the odor of sweet decay. The meat turns dark and the crop shrivels on the ground. And the pears grow yellow and soft, $5 a ton, $5 for 40 50-pound boxes. Trees pruned and sprayed, orchards cultivated. Pick the fruit, put in boxes, load the trucks, deliver the fruit to the cannery. 40 boxes for $5. We can't do it, and the yellow fruit falls heavily on the ground and splashes the ground. The yellow jackets dig into the soft meat, and there is a smell of ferment and rot. Then the grapes. We can't make good wine. People can't buy good wine. Rip the grapes from the vines. Good grapes, rotten grapes, wasp-stung grapes. Press stems, press dirt, and rot. But there's mildew and formic acid in the vats. Add sulfur and tannic acid. The smell from the ferment is not the rich odor of wine, but the smell of decaying chemicals. Oh well, it has alcohol in it anyway. They can get drunk. The little farmers watched debt creep up on them like the tide. They sprayed the trees and sold no crop. They pruned and grafted and could not pick the crop. And the men of knowledge have worked, have consisted, and the fruit is rotting on the ground. And the decaying mash in the wine vats is poisoning the air. And the taste of wine, no grape flavor at all, just sulfur and tannic acid and alcohol. This little orchard will be part of a great holding next year, for the debt will have choked the owner. This vineyard will belong to the bank. Only the great owners can survive, for they own the canneries too. And 4 pears peeled and cut in half, cooked and canned, still cost 15 cents. And the canned pears do not spoil. They will last for years. The decay spreads over the state, and the sweet smell is a great sorrow on the land. Men who can graft the trees and make the seed fertile and big can find no way to let the hungry people eat their produce. Men who have created new fruits in the world cannot create a system whereby their fruits may be eaten, and the failure hangs over the state like a great sorrow. The works of these roots of the vines, of the trees, must be destroyed to keep up the price, and this is the saddest, bitterest thing of all. Carloads of oranges dumped on the ground. The people came for miles to take the fruit, but this could not be. How would they buy oranges at 20 cents a dozen if they could drive out and pick them up? And men with hoses squirt kerosene on oranges, and they are angry at the crime, angry at the people who have come to take the fruit. 1 million people hungry, needing the fruit, and kerosene sprayed over the golden mountains. And the smell of rot fills the country. Burn coffee for fuel in the ships. Burn corn to keep warm. It makes a hot fire. Dump potatoes in the rivers and place guards along the banks to keep the hungry people from fishing them out. Slaughter the pigs and bury them and let the putrescence drip down into the earth. There is a crime here that goes beyond denunciation. There is a sorrow here that weeping cannot symbolize. There is a failure here that topples all of our success. The fertile earth, the straight tree rows, the sturdy trunks and the ripe fruit. And the children dying of pellagra must die because a profit cannot be taken from an orange. And coroners must fill the certificates, died of malnutrition because the food must rot, must be forced to rot. The people come with nets to fish for potatoes in the river, and the guards hold them back. They come in rattling cars to get the dumped oranges, but the kerosene is sprayed, and they stand still and watch the potatoes float by. Listen to the screaming pigs being killed in a ditch and covered with quicklime. Watch the mountain of oranges slop down to a putrefying ooze, and in the eyes of the people there is a failure, and in the eyes of a hungry there is a growing wrath. In the souls of the people the grapes of wrath are filling and growing heavy for the vintage.